Group. We're one of the employee resource groups here at the agency. We're happy to bring you another part of our series of Lunch and Learn product brands where we try to bring awareness and discussion around various issues related to disabilities and indeed reasonable accommodations. One of them we believe that's key and that we're focusing on the first half of the year in terms of our product brand is the idea of technology, technology access, technology, and information access. Our last Lunch and Learn in February, those two sessions discussed in a panel format the idea of what are kind of the benefits and the challenges of accessible technologies and accessible information technology, and how is that building inclusion, diversity in the workforce in terms of disabilities, both employees with disabilities and, as we hope on an increasing basis, managers with disabilities. This second session delves particularly into both the policy and I would think perhaps some mechanics of Section 508, which deals with information technology access. Aaron Allen is our featured speaker. He works in OTS. I've been longtime friends with him and am always impressed by his abilities with technology, as well as his knowledge in this field of accessible technology and making sure that people with disabilities can really be included in the workplace by having access to a computer or to Adobe or to a website, just like a non-disabled person, one of our colleagues at the agency. So our agenda today, fortunately you don't have to hear too much more from me today, is three things. Number one, we're going to just introduce the DERG and mostly to appreciate the team for 5 seconds. Number two, most of the meat and potatoes of this discussion and of April 12th, when Aaron will appear again, will be his presentation, which will be PowerPoint based. We've transmitted that to the DERG and to others. Also, we can transmit it again either here in the room in paper-based form or electronically should somebody else need another copy. Sue, our vice chair, will do that. Number two, we're going to set real quickly the agenda and then the ground rules, and then you don't have to hear from me. You'll hear from our eloquent speaker, Aaron. So number one, the DERG is an employee resource group here at the agency intended at bringing awareness to disability issues as well as serving as a soft platform for bringing people together and resolving issues as they come to our attention. We have a close and a positive relationship with OCR, our sponsor for the ERG, as well as all the ERGs here at the agency. Our idea is really to amplify and advance this year, at least in terms of my tenure as chair, the idea of leaders with disabilities, both really continuing the great product brands we already have, as well as amplifying the conversation whenever we can, including some health topics when possible. So today's agenda is number one, the first 25 minutes or so, or such time as Aaron consumes, will be dedicated to a straightforward kind of lecture format. We'll be discussing Section 508. The rest of the time will be rendered to questions. These are the ground rules that will govern that question and answer session. Number one, I would humbly and respectfully request you keep your phones on silence. Number two, we're going to go around in terms of questions in the room as follows. Number one, here in the room physically, anybody who's at the table here can ask questions. Number two, we want to be more inclusive of the regions at the DERG. So if you feel you're in a region, in the second round of questions, anybody in the region can ask questions first. And then number three, anybody else can kind of join in. If that sounds like a fair set of agenda, again, please silence your phone. If that's a fair agenda and kind of ground rules, I would really like to open up the floor to Aaron, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank everyone for being here for our Section 508 Lunch and Learn. I want to thank the Disability Employees Resource Group and OEOCR for sponsoring this event. We can have slide one up, of course. And this is just our introductory slide. Not much information here. Just gives you who's sponsoring it and today's date. We can go to slide two, please. And if everyone could mute your phones. Okay. Now, Section 508 is a requirement of the Federal Rehabilitation Act 1973. It requires that information and information technology utilized by the federal government through procurement or through other means be Section 508 compliant, accessible to people with disabilities with the equal access as for those people without disabilities. It requires that when the federal government acquires any applications, it is deemed accessible or Section 508 compliant based on specific standards. Now, there are certain exceptions. Section 508 would allow for undue burdens if such exceptions would be, deemed necessary to make sure that the application might meet the agency's need or mission, but may not fully be compliant. Now, in such instances of an exception, there still is requirements that the information deemed from that application or information technology be accessible for people who may need it at the back end. So if you have an application you're using where the interface is not compliant, the actual outcome or any documents deemed from that application must be compliant. Now, individuals with disabilities must have access to information technology or information systems that are used by the public. If you think of the healthcare.gov marketplace environment, individuals who have to access systems like that or SSA systems, those systems also must be 508 compliant. And there are stringent regulations regarding usability for such systems. Let me go to slide 3, please. Now, specifically, Section 508 of the Rehab Act was designed to eliminate barriers, open new opportunities for people with disabilities, and encourage development of systems and platforms that would achieve those goals. Also, as I said before, to give people with disabilities access to information that's comparable for those people without disabilities. Okay, slide 4, please. Now, Section 508 has many requirements, but there are 3 main requirements that must be met. One is technical requirements. The technical requirements, which are actually defined by the United States Access Board, refer to how applications are developed, how websites are coded and developed, and how documents are rendered compliant. So when I'm thinking for example, when I'm thinking of applications like Microsoft Word or Excel, or operating systems like Windows 8 or Windows 10, those applications have to have Section 508 compliance built in. They must be accessible to the users, or they need to be rendered accessible by applications for users to use. As we had an earlier discussion on assistive technologies, this is where that will come into play. The operating system must allow what's called plugins, so that assistive technology can utilize those platforms and then render that information accessible to the user. Software, of course, and documents, Microsoft Word documents must be compliant. They must be structured in a way that renders them accessible to screen reading technologies and large print technologies. Now, the other requirement, one of the other requirements is functional requirements. Functional requirements refers to overall accessibility, where regardless of the type of disability a person may have, the application or environment must be suitable to allow multiple types of applications or system technology to interface. For example, screen reading technology, which is one type of technology, but other technologies such as Dragon, naturally speaking, which is technology for people who are unable to use the keyboard, or mouse pointer technology. Fingerprint technology is also considered there, where you have people who are not able to interface with the application in standard traditional forms. You have to allow for functional access through other means that are non-traditional. Another requirement is support requirements. Now, what this refers to is that an applications or information technology must provide documentation or support for people with disabilities in a manner that is also accessible. In other words, if you're buying a software package like Adobe, the user guide or manuals must be provided in electronic format that is accessible for people with disabilities. Okay, the next slide.
Need to take this class. Forgot it.
Okay, if you could mute your phone, please. Thank you. Okay, slide 5. Now, electronic information technology includes, but is not limited to, things like computer software, hardware, telephones, technology such as mobile phones, tablets, PDAs, printers, copiers, scanners, those information kiosks that you go and obtain informational tickets at an airport, bank machines, things of that nature. Now, the information, those types of technologies that I mentioned, in addition to any information transmitted by those technologies, must be made accessible. Section 508 applies to everything, whether it's desktop software to web-hosted, web-based materials. It must be compliant or usable for people with disabilities. If CMS is paying for any of the technology, Section 508 applies, even if it may not seem like relevant technology. For example, CMS procures a lot of services, and those services could render things such as invoices or reports or presentations or trainings, and those items must be accessible to people with disabilities. Okay, slide 6, please. Okay, now, Section 508 is designed to provide access to information for people with disabilities. And most of the disabilities covered are people with visual disabilities, hearing disabilities, cognitive disabilities, and mobility impaired disabilities, unable to physically access information technology in a traditional format. Okay, slide 7. Now, this is a complicated slide because it's sort of contradictory. There are certain requirements outlined for applications and information technology to be accessible. When trying to meet that accessibility threshold, however, it is possible to render information technologies unusable because of the stringent guidelines for accessibility. Now, for that reason, we always, at CMS, require that applications, information technology procured by CMS must be tested and reviewed under several assistive technologies to make sure that they're meeting the compliance requirement and meeting the usability of the needs for the user involved. Generally, when you have an individual with a disability saying that they're unable to access a technology, they're referring to the usability factor. You can have applications that are Section 508 compliant, but create major usability challenges due to the reading of the guidelines by the Access Board and the implementation of the technology itself. And in those cases, we often just do our own personal reviews to provide comments and give feedback to developers so they can avoid some of those pitfalls. If we can go to the next slide, please, slide 8. Implementation of Section 508. Now, everyone who works for CMS is responsible for making sure that systems, applications, documents, products that they're developing are Section 508 compliant. If you're in procurement, you know what your role is as a core or as a contract specialist. If you are in regulations or if you are in document issuance of that nature, the documents you produce and have to be distributed, they have to be 508 compliant. If your role at CMS deals with web content management, website development, or website design, there are certain requirements for you to meet Section 508 requirements and accessibility. So everyone has a role, and if you're not sure based on your job functions, you can reach out and we can have that conversation to make sure that you're on the same page. Okay, if we can go to slide 9. I want to talk about component clearance officers. Each component at CMS, whether you are in CMCS, CM, OSORA, OEOCR, Office of Information Technology, you have someone or should have someone in your component who is a Section 508 clearance officer. This slide outlines some of the duties that they're responsible for. Of course, there's more, but this is just an overarching description of what they're responsible for. All the documentation that they work on, for dissemination, must be 508 compliant. If they're looking at software procurement for their component, be it as part of a technical advisory panel or as part of just a resource for a core or contract officer in a component, they're looking for a certain Section 508 language. If they're doing the CAMS process, our acquisition management software process, they have to make sure that there's certain Section 508 language within those statement of work or procurement packages. We also asked our Section 508 clearance officers to be involved in the testing process. That doesn't mean that they're testing. That just means that they are aware that an application that's being requested by their component is slated for testing by the Section 508 accessibility testing team at CMS. So they are involved in that process. And if you have questions about Section 508, about accessibility, about any of this, they're the first and best point of contacts for you to reach out to. Okay, can we go to the next slide, slide 10? Now, this slide focuses on some of the resources that we have available at CMS. There are document guides on how to make your documents Section 508 compliant. And there's one for Word, Excel, PowerPoint. And if you go to our website, we even have information on making Adobe Section 508 compliant, Adobe files or forms. This information is helpful because you can download this information, have it at your desk or at your ready, and making sure that you're following those steps to make Section 508 compliant documents that everyone can utilize. You'll also discover that once you create templates or create design templates that are 508 compliant the first time, and go to use them, you minimize any issues of Section 508 compliance that may occur during the conversion of your documents. It is often stressed, and I stress it as much as I can, if you make your document compliant in the rendering tool, Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, you minimize the scope of work needed to make documents 508 compliant when you transmit it to Adobe. Adobe, if anyone has ever used Adobe DC or Adobe Pro, it is a very trying tool to make documents compliant in Adobe. There's a lot to it. It requires a skill set. It requires training to get that skill set. Not everyone has that. But if we start in Word, if we follow the accessibility checklist, if we utilize Word's built-in accessibility checker, we significantly minimize the scope of work needed in Adobe to make those files compliant. I want to stress that. And again, if you have questions, please reach out to your clearance officers. Slide 11, please. If you're responsible for purchasing any information technology for your use for CMS, for your component, if there's software that you feel that your component needs to use for CMS business, one of the things that you'll need from the software provider, the vendor, is the product assessment template. Now, that's a document that provides information on the accessibility or lack of accessibility of an application. It's a document that we are required to review before any installation of any application can be put on the infrastructure at CMS. It is also a document that we utilize to go by for testing purposes. So having that document is critical. I'm often concerned when manufacturers or vendors say, well, we don't have such a document, because they don't understand the premise, the principles of Section 508 compliance, which has been around a long time. They can't no longer use, we've never heard of it. It is required for many, if not all, government procurements through GSA. So there is a structure through GSA for requiring the document, and we follow that same premise and principle. Okay, slide 12, please. Now, this is just our resources sheet, and if you have questions, please feel free to send an email to us at CMS section_508 at cms.hhs.gov, or you can go to the CMS Section 508 webpage, where you'll have a lot of information about Section 508, the clearance officers in your component, and any other questions you may have, about validation, about Section 508 rules, about meeting the standards and the definitions, things of that nature. Okay, and that actually is it for me. We can now open the floor for questions, starting in the room. If people have questions, please feel free to chime in.
Please, anybody in the room? No? Then somebody online, perhaps?
No questions from me.
Hi, this is Roberto. I have a question. Does Section 508 apply to like a system, like a web-based system?
Okay, Roberto, yes. Section 508 would apply if CMS is procuring or utilizing that web-based application for its own business, or if it is utilizing it for dealing with the public. if we are hosting information on that system. The standards for Section 508, there's specific standards for web-based content, and that would be under a certain section of Section 508 called 1194, 21, and 22 were applicable. So yes, Section 508 applies. If it's housed on the web, it must be 508 compliant.
What do we do when a developer doesn't know how to correct such an issue?
Ooh, now see, I almost said something that would have gotten me executed. Because what I normally do is, well, now it depends. If you have developers who are developing for you, they must adhere to knowing 508 before that contract is signed. It's generally in our statement of work or in our contract language where they must, any deliverable, and this is a deliverable, must be 508 compliant. Now, if they are not aware or if they're unable to fix issues that they've developed, they must address those issues as part of the contract.
Okay. My next question is, who do I work with? Because I'm having a problem with one of our systems, HPMS, the CTM complaint tracking system, and there seems to be a bug or something that is not allowing my screen reader magic to work with, that updated system. It was recently updated, and the developer can't fix it. I don't know what's going on, and this is due to a new update just recently, and it was working.
Okay, Roberto, was it working before the update?
Yes, it was.
Ah, okay. We may not have a Section 508 issue. What this is sounding more to be an infrastructure or technology related issue. Remember now, Section 508 is a group of standards. So you can have something that's coded as Section 508 compliant, and then your technology may not work with it, or my technology may not work with it, or there could be other variables. So what we'll do is, what component are you in?
I'm in CMHPO or DMHPO.
Okay. I'm not good with all these acronyms. How about we take this offline, and you can send an email directly to me. It's aaron.allen@cms.hhs.gov. I'll get some information from you, and we'll see what some of the issues could be. It could be a technology rendering issue with Magic. It could be your laptop. It could be the color of the sky a certain day. It could be anything. So we'll touch base afterwards. Okay.
Okay. Can you spell your name? Is it ARON?
AARON.
Dot ALLN.
ALLEN.
EN. Okay. Okay, I got it. Thanks. Thank you for your help.
We have a phone question.
Yes, this is Lisa Arrington, and I'm with OHC.
Hello,
my
Lisa.
Hi. My question is dealing with other other than the internet, the IE. When it comes to Google Chrome, is Google Chrome 508 compliant?
No.
Okay, it's not. Okay.
No. Wait. Let me say this.
Okay.
Up until recently, we have had significant issues with the use of Google Chrome and screen reading technology used by CMS. The first caveat of my sentence is up until recently.
Okay.
Recently, with Google Chrome's latest release, which I'm hoping that everyone has on their desktop, Google has made significant leaps. I don't mean steps, and I'm not talking steps or inches or yards. I'm saying leaps of technology. I'm not going to say it is now as usable as IE is,
Okay.
and it's getting better.
Okay.
We're still testing Google Chrome, the latest iteration, and we will make that declaration shortly. I can tell you that if you're experiencing issues, if you are a user of assistive technology and you are experiencing IE-related issues, you can try Google Chrome. Your results will be better today than they were a month ago.
Okay.
Because most of everyone has been upgraded to the newest Google Chrome build, and Google has made significant strides in working out the accessibility kinks.
Okay. Okay. Because I am like the backup for the LMS. And we were in a meeting yesterday, and one of the other components had they had classes they want to put into the LMS, and of course sometimes, i.e., you have an issue with it. You know, it can be any day of the week. Yesterday it was doing good for me, but today it might not be. And the component, the young lady said, well, we were told that we cannot, that if you use Google Chrome, it could not be read. The document could not be read with the reader.
Well, and let me also, here's another caveat. Unfortunately, it depends on the training. So every training will still need testing or review before LMS deployment, because sometimes it is not the Google Chrome per se. It's something called SkillSoft, or it could be the Saba learning interface. When you are developing training, when you are developing learning material, you're interfacing on 4 different levels: the screen reader, the browser, the platform, that's LMS, and the tool used to create the training. That's your Saba or your SkillSoft or your Captivate. Your accessibility challenges could be at any or all of those levels.
Okay.
If you are developing training, if your component is developing training, please have it reviewed by your Section 508 clearance officer and tested by the IT service desk for accessibility.
Okay. 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 Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions from the phone?
Yes, this is Connie from the DSG group. This may have already been asked, but is there a copy of the PowerPoint? And there's a lot of good links in there that I would like to capture.
The PowerPoint slide deck that I just went through has been distributed. If you send an email to susanna.lang@cms.hhs.gov, she will provide you with a PowerPoint slide deck as seen here on TV.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Aaron. I have another question. This is Roberto again. Do you know if the agency will be updating the Magic software anytime, or if there's a newer version of Magic?
I don't know what version of Magic users are using. If there is to be an update, that would be through the reasonable accommodations team. I don't have a name for you there. I do know that cyclical refreshes are often done. JAWS is slated, and but as far as because that's a different component than I am in. I deal with 508 on the spectrum of the policy. You're asking assistive technology, but that's a good question. but it's not one I can answer.
Well, okay. I
But
got
that
it.
will be a reasonable accommodations question through OEOCR, and someone in that shop may be able to assist you.
Roberto, this is Susanna. You can contact Lee Lunsford with your question.
All right. Thank you, Susanna. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Any other questions online?
I have a question.
Our vice chair has a question.
Aaron, is the Ensign 508 compliant?
The
in
what?
The ampersand sign, is that 508 compliant in a document?
I mean, your screen reader will read it. It's any of the other character sets. It's a character set like any other character set. I mean, it depends on. I mean, okay. Is it 508 compliant? Yes. Does it create usability challenges? It depends on how you're using the ampersand sign.
Okay.
So that's a two-stage question. But yes, the ampersand sign is 508 compliant. Mm-hmm.
Aaron, this is Brianna. Good morning.
Rayon.
I just sent you an email before I came down about 20 minutes ago, but I was trying to reconfirm with you, is embedding a file 508 compliant? I could not find it anywhere on our websites, meaning that if you have a Word document and you attach/embed a Excel file.
I'm sorry, what? And you want to embed
Yeah, I told them no, but
an Excel file?
before I hit send on it, I wanted to reconfirm it. I couldn't find it in the how-to file or the tip file. So typically what they do is they create a
Okay.
Word document and they want to include an Excel spreadsheet within the file.
Okay. Ooh, the problem. Okay. Yes, it can be done, but it's based on how it is done. It's probably easier to have a link to that Excel spreadsheet in the file, but it would depend on, because when you're looking an Excel spreadsheet, it's going to be, based on a horizontal plane of cells and columns within a vertical document, and I don't know how that's going to render it as readability. That's what I'm saying. Will it be compliant? Meaning, will the text be there? Yes. Will it have headers and foot and structure? I don't know.
My biggest concern was whether the author creates it today, sends it to the receiver opens it, and they're able to read it. Then they might try it again the following week or the next day, and it might look like it might read as an object / an image, and so it won't open consistently. That was really my biggest concern.
I would have to see that file,
okay,
and provide an individual comment on that type of file. I don't recommend embedding anything into a Word file.
Okay.
But
that's what I said.
Mm-hmm.
So Brianna, this is Gary. Aaron, Brianna here in the room asked a question which I think is a good one because it points to a larger set of questions. I think somebody else asked this as well. What I heard you say is really one major thing so far today. Section 508 is the body of policy or the standards. That's different than usability or functionality.
That's correct.
And that seemed really confusing to most of us neophytes with technology. So I wonder, A, that seems really confusing, and B, what do we need to do to bridge better understanding about that? Just because it sounds like just because you're compliant doesn't necessarily mean that something's accessible.
Exactly.
Okay. Well.
Hey, Aaron.
Yes.
This is Beth Lloyd. I work with Annette Pearson, and I know we've met before, but anyway, I thought when you embed that it won't open the document properly in 508.
Exactly.
But that's not a 508 challenge. That what happens is you're dealing with, like I said, like I'm saying, sometimes platforms, So if you embed a document and it may need a reader on that, or it depends on what you're embedding. Some people embed images into a document, and that creates a mess. But if you're embedding text into a text document, that can create a mess. What I'm saying to you is it can be done.
I think what she's trying to do is embed a file, like a document file for that would link, if you will, and open. And from what Annette tells me, that cannot be done.
Actually, this is Malia Jensen from Ojai. I bumped up against that at my last agency when I was at VA, and there is actually a hotkey that will, because when I first bumped up against it, I thought it wasn't compliant either, but it actually is, and there's actually a hotkey that you can use to access documents that are embedded into Word documents. I don't recall what it is off the top of my head, but I would be happy to research that.
Thank you.
I'd love to know. Yes, please.
And like I said, it can be done, but it does create accessibility challenges. Not, for example, if their hotkeys are needed, those hotkeys can't interfere with the technology being used, which also use hotkeys. So it gets into a whole finite thing of each one needs to be looked at for its more of usability than compliant. In other words, is it compliant? If the document you're embedding is compliant and you're embedding it into a compliant document, then you're talking usability now. Is that once I engage that embedded document, is it in the same structure? Are there tables? Are there nesting tables? If there are images, are those images alt tagged? If the alt tagging related to the actual image I'm looking at, it becomes a myriad of challenges. But it can be done. I'm just saying it's not something I would do.
So you would
because I understand all the challenges, and what might work for me on a screen reader using JAWS is not going to work for my boy Roberto in Magic. So those are the challenges.
Okay. Two things to that. So you would add it as an attachment versus
I would
an
probably
embedded document?
do an attachment or link, or now it all depends on where it is. If we're looking at documents that are on the web, and that document's on the web, you have a link to that document on the web. But embedding a document, and then so when I need to change that document that I'm embedding, I need to change so much. If I have a link to this document, I just change what's in that document, and anyone using that link can link to the same document. That's what makes SharePoint so sweet, where you can have a document that's changeable, and people are linking to the same document and seeing the new changes. Embedding it means that that's there forever, and if it needs to be changed, I need to embed it again into another document and send that again. I think that, I guess if people wish to do it, there are caveats. It needs to be reviewed and tested, and if you don't, there are so many other ways to ease around the complexities of that.
Okay. And then Annette just emailed me and said to let you know that when you try to embed the document that you would want to open, it shows up as a picture similar to when a document is added into an email.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, what Annette is saying is, everyone, is that if you have a document in Word and you're trying to embed it, it comes across as an image. But there's a way to do it to make that document a text, but that document itself must be text. The nuances are just too complicated, and it's easier to have a document linked to the document you wish to embed, and then provide what's called structure verbiage around, a document will go here. This table, linked to the table, is a depiction of of state-related data code sets for Medicaid recipients or something. There are much better ways where you aren't managing a full document, because every time you need to change the embedded document, you're changing the original document too. Yep. Is that making sense? I'm not talking 508. I'm talking just a general usability. It makes a mess. It can make a mess.
Thank you.
Now, Gary, back to your thought. Usability and Section 508 compliance have always had this where people feel if it's 508 compliant, it must be usable. And that usability challenges are user-based, and that's where a lot of the complexity and the confusion come in. There are people who may not have or may be using a different assistive technology, and the assistive technology itself may be rendering content differently. I know because I use JAWS, and I also use something called NVDA, and when I look at the exact same online content, I get different renderings based on the application I'm using. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not 508 compliant, but the usability, things like the order of some of the checkboxes, the order of the content might be slightly off. So there are a lot of nuances there. And usability, something that is not usable by someone, it could be a learning curve. There may be nuances to that application where they need to learn controls in order to navigate an application. There may be coding issues where it's coded correctly, but the screen reader isn't picking up on nuances because of a setting within the screen reader. So there are a lot of usability challenges that we all face. But compliance and usability at this very moment, today, April 4th, don't necessarily mean the same thing. The compliance, however, is coming into its own, meaning the new refresh, Section 508 standards, take into account usability more than just a set of guidelines for a developer to go by. So it is my hope that the two terms will become more synonymous and have more interrelated meaning as we move forward with new technologies, with new platforms, with new interfaces, where those challenges will be met through the usability side, the commercial side of usability, what Amazon is doing with the Echo, what Apple is doing with new iPhone technology, what Google is doing. They're setting forth usability and eliminating usability barriers, not Section 508 compliance barriers, because they're addressing the whole scope of making their products more usable for everyone as opposed to targeting certain segments of the population.
So to make that into a soundbite, which might be an oversimplification, you're saying Section 508 is basically becoming more practical. The guidelines are more practicality oriented.
The new Section 508 guidelines that are coming forth are much more practical, and will be more achievable.
That sounds like a good stopping point, actually. Are there any other questions? The room? No? Online? If we have, either in the room or online, if we haven't asked your questions, please send an email to the email box for the Disability Employee Resource Group, which I think is CMS DERG at your typical CMS HHS Gov. Or not, you can always just send something directly to me. Thanks so much. We have two executive board members here in the room. We have Malia, we have Sue. So thanks so much for your hard work, and thank you, Aaron, for speaking today. Our next session of this will be
It's been a pleasure.
Oh, ours too. April 12th at 12 p.m. Otherwise, we stand adjourned.
For the
adjourned.
Who's Malia? Me. Hello, I'm Yolanda. Just want to have a face with the name.